To describe the term drok, imagine that, or rather presume that reality were an illusion, were an organic construct projected onto everything that is. That everything from rays of light to hot and cold to the moisture of an ice cube to the concept, our understanding of math, is part of us. It's alive from everyone's perspective. The world, everything they experience is simply them being the world's greatest charades player, being that light and cold are like tears. They're something that we secrete, we produce to aid us in some way. And that the assumption of perception is that we perceiving something is as pushing a blanket over it. That we must know, maybe we don't know exactly everything about reality based on perception, it has flaws, but it must be close because of the way perception works, that like pushing a blanket over it, it's got to be something like what's underneath it. Though in the case of perception, in that hypothetical realm, no one has ever seen under this blanket. And therefore, even though we may enhance our perceptions, thinner blankets, more pressure in specified locations, we don't know how impressions work here. And subsequently, it is not reasonable to presume that perception is that we know enough about, we know reality in a similar way that we know what's under a blanket by its impression. Presume that, therefore, life is indistinguishable from oblivion to us. That life, indeed, looks like death, like nothing at all. Presume that not only is reality indistinguishable from oblivion, we have no idea how real objects actually look because reality cannot be pictured. The concept of picture, space, all of that is an organic construct. Perception is an organ, and not merely an organ, but an internal organ. That the current area itself, which is, let's say, it is a word this uses to make a comparison between the two-dimensional plane of visual perception and the somatosensory cortex or somatic experience, our full bloom and range of experiences being like a stage, as an aria, with the orchestra and the performers on the stage, the current aria. That the current aria is projected onto a projector screen that is the inside of our chest, that we perceive the whole world from the inside of our own chest. Reality being an internal organ, now presume that the lines between our sense of self and our sense of space, the part of us that is space itself, are blurred, and we can no longer tell where one ends and the other begins. Presume that as an object moves across space, that as space moves through space across the current area, that as space moves, so does our sense of self, that we fail to delineate them or see them as anything other than the same. And that means that the qualities of one's sense of self automatically end up inheriting the context of space, being essentially something that has been confused for something that can and now is moving, has given it the quality of space and has changed its nature, the nature of self, and has resulted in the concept of other. A degeneration of consciousness would result in something that otherwise wouldn't be possible. Propose a similar situation, but instead of between space and self, space and fear. That when you blur the lines between space and space moves, fear automatically moves, and by moving automatically inherits this quality of space by being something that can and is moving, and that the outcome of that is the fear is similar to what happened to you. It becomes the fact that when we point to what we are afraid of, we now point to something else. We feel as if the thing that is frightening is over there, such as that if if one had to choose between feeling happy and feeling scared when something is coming to kill us, even if we would run the same way in either case, I think that you would still, if asked which one seems suitable or represents the situation the best, I think you would pick fear. There is something about fear that tells us something about the situation. Propose that as opposed to a mere alarm that simply sounds and triggers a reaction, that as a result of a degeneration of consciousness, a system of information capable of imparting knowledge or a scale of awareness about one's surroundings that is otherwise not possible is part of fear and part of the experience of fear and many other systems of perception within the Karnaria, or feelings, if you will. Now propose that as instead of something such as eat this is good, or run from that is bad, that there could be a feeling, a sensation that could not cause you to know but feel, something like the entire Webster's Dictionary. What if you had anger, happiness, pain, Webster's Dictionary? That the Webster's Dictionary had its own sensation that could impart every word and every contour of every letter, the book, the texture of the book, every word's meaning, all of that without knowledge, in the same way that a newborn ant can understand that something is coming after it is going to destroy it based on the experience of fear. This concept is called a drolk. Drolks are used by gods as implements of communication and are often weaponized, such as that fight between Super Saiyan God Super Saiyan Vegeta and Jesus ended when Barbario hurled just after Vegeta asked that question, Barbario hurled the blade of Istanu straight through the heavens through an opening in the cosmos, and it struck Vegeta. But remember that at this point, that apparition of Vegeta was a psychic manifestation of Jesus' consciousness that was being manipulated by Vegeta from within the infernal chain sphere puzzle Theon. And that by doing so, he had also attacked Jesus. But what is also important is that the blade drolked its nature. It gave him, Vegeta, a sensation that caused him to instantly be aware, not know, but be aware of what to do. And so Vegeta teleports behind Jesus and essentially presses himself into Jesus, plunging the sword through Jesus, and the blade wiped both of them from existence. Jesus, being a god, eventually can do anything, returned from non-existence, but Vegeta still does not exist. No one in the god knows, other than gods, knows who he is or where he was or what happened. He's completely gone. Ampelo once said that Orpheus, his son, god of music, said that a great musician is one who not only has great knowledge of music, but who can articulate this knowledge with a level of strain that will not wake or disturb a dream. And that in a modality of thought or a state of concentration much like a dream, that one can follow that dream can dream about that knowledge and can follow that dream to new knowledge and add that to what you know. And this cycle repeats until the strain of bearing this knowledge disturbs the dream, and at that point the work becomes more formulaic. A person with the potency of mind and spirit to be able to perpetuate that cycle long enough would be the best musician. When we are weary, it is as if there is a weight that forces all the gears in our being to come to a grinding halt enough that it is almost as if our consciousness is dialed down to this range where dreams thrive, and the grainy busyness that is the hallmark of life that seems to put things on nerve and make things serious and prevent you from having fun with whatever it is that you are doing, that this isn't fun anymore sort of experience. That give you the sense that you are not good at life and that you have to take this more seriously, that you're in more danger, and puts you, and strain, that puts more strain on you to merely be alive, that seems to be at the background of life in general. It is as if the world takes on an aspect of the surreal quality bordering on that of a dream that takes it out of that situation where everything is serious and it is easier to concentrate and the ideas can start coming to you. Part of the reason Back to the Future worked is because Marty McFly went on the journey. He went to a faraway place, but through time to the same place that is still essentially a place that he knows very well. And it combines the parts of us that value being in a place that is familiar as well as those things that are new, that provide the sense that you're going to do well here, that this is a place that you're going to expand into, that you have what it takes, because for the degree of unfamiliarity is to undermine your confidence is not present here, or not to some significant degree. And it is an aspect of surrealness that happens every day, that has an association with regular life. In the film Final Destination, a very interesting aspect of the film was toward the beginning, where Alex is in his room and you're focusing on him sleeping, as if in the quiet of this borderline, if not archetypal, cave of dreams cocoon that we put up around us in a place that we are familiar as we become weary and drift to sleep. Can you hear or catch a glimpse of something beyond usual reaching you or coming to you? And that in some obscure way, Alex was able to meet what was to come as a result of it. It evokes associations with, as Phobos does in general, with hiding cats, with that and toddlers, where there is this sense of hiding, but of a sense of weakness. You're doing this because you are afraid, but there is also a sense of strength in that. There is a sense of, you're not trapping me in here, I'm keeping you out. I'm here and I choose to be here, and now you can't get me. There is a sense of security in an act driven by and defined by or derived from insecurity. Could a cat in a tree stump become weary permanently, and the walls and the inside of the tree trunk compress them and grind its gears down to the point where things such as fear and pain and dread and discomfort cannot reach the momentum required to take away its willingness to hold on to what is important to it? Doth the fear of the fraidy cat bequeatheth the nerve to hide the audacity to conceal itself from the world forever, regardless of cold, of disease, of discomfort, pressure sores, of chicken mac nuggets? God damn it, Sebastian. I may never run quickly, I may never catch fishes, I may never be smitten, I may never have kittens. But I was a not-so-cool cat with a sweet-ass hiding spot. I didn't just take refuge and hide in this tree. Boop! I am a tree. And you know what they'll write on my epitaph? You didn't find me. As if for once your body finally decided there was something more important than coercing you with pain and suffering and fear. That all those things can wait. Now is the time for sleep. As if finally your body is on your side, and not just an organism dragging along a consciousness. The gifts that Phobos gives to frightened cats and toddlers, strangely enough, 2-year-olds. There is a feral aspect to being a toddler. This recalls being small enough that it wasn't vocal or wasn't speaking much, but that it could move around. And this was living with its great-grandmother, and this would defecate in corners where no one would see it, thinking no one would find it. And this wouldn't go much of anywhere. This would stay and live in the house. But this didn't think much of it other than that it was hidden. This didn't think of it as being trapped. This thought of it as being hidden. There's a post-apocalyptic mindset to being a toddler that I'd like to think we should share, that they share with cats. Some remnants of Phobos, this latter or neglected to mention earlier, in prelude and homage or as an ode to his father, Ares, the god of war. These are people who abducted you and then took it upon themselves to dictate to you what to do, when to rise, what to eat, how to walk, how to move, what to say, when to say it, how to say it, what to do, how to live, what to think and what to believe all the time, every day, your whole life, on the behest of the state. And do you ever look your parents in the eyes and tell them, you know what, my whole life you've been not but a necessary evil? No, you accept what they do as absolute good, not even morally ambivalent. This is parental authority. Surely it is the role of a leader to use the fact that they provide for you in order to justify domination. I had a dream once, it wasn't a lucid one, but a dream where Ares was present at a fence, at a border between Hrvatica and Herzegovina. And he said that the human soul has limits, it is weak, it gets tired, simply because the human soul does not have the stamina to hate indefinitely and becomes weary, does not change what is right and what is wrong. And what is right goes on without you. And then he puts this strange, almost Japanese, Chinese symbol. It's forged of like gold, tarnished, polychromatic, iridescent, tarnished gold zinc oxide looking thing at the border, and it just sits there. This is not certain what it meant. It is funny how people tell you it's not worth it, as if they are trying to help you when they are actually telling you to give up. They said that instead, you would react to that differently. But you have surrendered the ability to associate that phrase with anything bad or offensive because you know that they are following the rules, being compensatory for some traditional or conventional edict set by a system of authority. Are successful governments but a pack of bullies that have successfully elicited Stockholm Syndrome and the halo effect out of those whom they dominate? You be the judge. The Apple meter pain buster is a concept that when our intellectual mental powers essentially put meters, they put ruler notches on certain things in certain ways. However, that system works in intervals. It has to have some intervals. And these intervals have limitations, unlike nature itself, like a fluid. Whereas that when we try to count something like an apple, we put notches on it. But the fact that we see the apple is more like an ancillary quantum computerized graphical processor that is made of nature that works on natural principles and are like a fluid and can fill in all the spaces between the notches, but as a result they're not compatible with our intellectual calculating mental faculties. Which is, let's say, why we can see one apple but not count exactly one apple. And that Sarzi could speak this language of pain fu that allowed him to use pain as that quantum computerized fluid that could generate a type of logic that could get in between the cracks. That if you could increase pain from one level to another and not break someone's spirit, imagine if you could do that indefinitely, and that rising was a fluid in a gauge, and that it could get in between all the cracks. And that is a concept that this uses in the GodCon for certain things. For instance, Ares could use the Apple meter pain buster to essentially soak between the fibers of someone who's using intellect and essentially stick to them. Use those fibers like Velcro or like phone book pages, but really tiny ones in between the layers of a sophisticated mathematical intellectual structure, and stick to it, and then pull them forward and smash their head into something. Or it's a tool, but it could be used in different ways. When a human says, "It's time for us to be like the rest of the world," that is an indication of a surrender to a system of authority with greater social weight. It is as if part of the process of domination is that part of us is left as a variable to be filled in by whoever is our rest of the world, who we then feel we have to be like. To consider them in obedience or submission to that state or system of authority as a state of health, and that therefore to deviate from them is unhealthy, and it has its own fear and anxiety or pain or some such thing, uncomfortability, that gets triggered when one goes against it or deviates from it. This was watching a documentary about Elaine Bent, or the end of the world cult, and the look in the witness's eyes, which is an expression you might see in many of them, particularly the more devoted followers, this crazed look in their eye. But when you look at the ones who were born there, who had spend their entire lives there, they seem like normal people. They're saying the same kinds of things, but they don't have this look. And this wonders if this is because that the older people came from the world where they were exposed to the system of authority enough to make them feel, to make that part of them inculcate the specific authority of the American government, or whatever system of authority was their rest of the world, to their state of health, and that in defiance of that, they are left with this self-imposed sense of sickness. I'm not certain, but propose that that's true. What this refers to, that system of social weight, the process by which we consider someone or something else the rest of the world for us, as the old vengeful spirits. Propose you lived in your own little world, and in that little world you came up with your own lifestyle, you created your own sense of honor and morality. You may have contrived a fit idea, but not a fighting fit idea. It seems that there are only a few good ideas that life can graft onto and perpetuate themselves and go on, and which subsequently most people end up using. That your individual ideas from your world would never be able to compete with. This is often much of the reason why people send children, for instance, to school, to be exposed to that system of authority and be bent to be more as those old vengeful spirits, at the cost of perhaps much of your individuality, to make certain that you are psychologically competitive with other people. My great-grandmother always told me would tell me that no, you don't become as they do. You stay just as you are. It is for them to be, you are to uplift them, and they are to rise to your level. You are not to let them drag you down. But I do not think that either her or myself knew what modern American urban children would be like. She was a person, this was raised by her primarily, and she was a person who dwelled in 1920s colonial Jamaica, where there was still when there was still an English colony in Jamaica, in the woods. She saw the modern secular world as having lost its way, and that God was going to smite it all, and that I was as this young prince who would be sent there to conquer it all and civilize it and bring order to things once again. But of course that didn't happen, for what, as this said, this suspects that neither her nor myself knew at that time, is that they have social tenure, that they may be hoodlums, for instance, but even these hoodlums, not only do they exist in greater number than I, and they being here first, they reinforce each other and give each other confidence to not feel that they have to give in to me, but more so than that, to survive any way of life, hoodlum or not, would have to make compromises. They have to learn how to deal with the proper authorities, another group of people. And there is a social osmosis that occurs, and as a result, that their numbers reinforcing each other might be what allows their confidence and their way of life to survive the compromise to begin with, and then the compromise causes them to take on characteristics from their environment, causing everyone to become more like each other and learn not a a respect, but a tolerance. Whether they like it or not, people will respond differently, will not respond so quickly as to reject or to retaliate against someone who they feel is... There is less of a sense of urgency. Mere hoodlums or otherwise, a social group of humans, in order to exist in the context of a greater number of social groups under the current paradigm of human civilization, under these specific circumstances, has to change in a way based on their environment to become like their environment, and has earned a recalcitrance, an immunity. And there is no way that even a group of mere hoodlums are going to feel that you have supremacy over them, regardless of how proper you are. To them, you are the one who is improper, and if anything, you are the one who must change. My great-grandmother thought that she would send me over there and I would educate all of them and make them better, but really, the reason why, as my grandmother probably was more cognizant of, why a child is sent to school is not to change everyone there and make them better, but to conquer and civilize them. It is for them to conquer and civilize you. The reason why I tell you this is perhaps because I'm losing my mind a little bit, but also because Ares was the god of civil order. He was the god of war, violence, and civil order, meaning that as opposed to, let's say, his father Theos, who was the god of empire, law, order, fate, and the heavens, and his mother Hera, who was the goddess of empire again, marriage, childbirth, and pomegranates. I would assume that Ares is the god of the politics derived from the primitive and barbaric aspects of social order, such as the female cycle aligning to the alpha-female sort of politics, which I would say would include the old vengeful spirits, so to speak, and of that in life you must make concessions of who you are, of your individuality, to be invited to the party of life, so to speak. There were a couple pictures that this derived the chest shilling cylinder drum percussion instrument cylinder chest piece round chest discs from, including Olivier Martinez himself, who seems to be in a similar way to Starscream. He was serendipitously wider, very wide. He's a broad character, and that played into it, as this claimed before or denoted before, serendipitously to what this was trying to portray with Ares, for purportedly he was a coward. He was the god of war, but he did not possess much mental fortitude. And so I thought I'd make him like the Starscream character from the Transformers film. He was made very with bird-like legs, perhaps also to represent the cowardly nature associated with birds, or chickens, specifically a type of bird, as well as this assumes with flight, and possibly the wideness having to do with lightness and thrust, lift, those characteristics. But it also has the effect of making him wider than he is thick, and that produces the effect of being deceptive about how strong you are, which could be associated with cowardice, that you lie to make yourself bigger than you are because you are not very strong and therefore may be weak. And subsequently this used that to essentially make Ares the zoot suit of the gods. This chose Olivier Martinez because he seemed as just the type of French heartthrob that this had associated with Ares. In general, this associated Ares with this French kind of zombie guy for being European, or Eastern European in general, has this offensive or uncultured, rude or uncouth aspect to it, that this associated with the brutality and primitiveness of that which was associated with Ares. French is a language with a lot of in it, and it's like it almost sounds like an accordion, which this associates with that part of the world. It's a very crisscrossing, heavy metal foreign art project aspect to that language, and that contributes to this person's perception of Aries, as well as the black hair. This is not certain if Olivier Martinez has black hair. However, this associates that with being less refined from the banality, brutality, drudgery, and perversion of the mortal world, as opposed to blue eyes and blonde hair that seem to have this characteristic of being separate, of being almost supernatural, unnatural, separate from the mortal world, which has a particularly high value in a post-Renaissance, post-Enlightenment era, post-intellectual or industrial and intellectual revolutionary era period, and Aries who represents this very barbaric, brutal, primitive aspect of human life. It seems fitting that Aries and Aphrodite would become enraptured in this sedulant and ardent sultry affair, considering that as a result of the mountains of Europe, the movement of soldiers was impeded just enough that no civilization in Europe was allowed to conquer all of it, but they were left just close enough or within reach that no civilization could deviate enough from the others to inhibit the flow of information, as well as eliminating weaker or civilizations, which might explain why, if you take a gander at the languages in Europe, they're all practically Latin. As a result that the mountains of Europe maintained the sovereignty of many small hostile warring nations, no one nation's mistake became everyone's mistake, and it became possible that if one nation would not greenlight a decision, someone could go elsewhere and have it greenlit there. That, in addition to the sedulant demand for innovation generated by the state of perennial war that Europe was in, resulted in the fact that if you had some money in medieval Europe, you got ahead. With that came an escalation or a trend of concentrated wealth, which resulted in individual rights to protect that wealth, and the inception of the modern trend of individualistic aspects in culture that this would refer to as the great and forlorn trek from tribalism, which gave way to Western standards of beauty. Indeed, it would seem that the luster and beauty of the trappings of modern civilization were all written in blood. That, in many ways, Aphrodite's beauty is one quenched in blood. And thus it seems fitting that they would be so enamored with one another. They were practically made for each other. You deserve each other! For the record, I have no idea if any of what I just said is true, but I believe it. Aries is the god of violence. When I think of violence, I think of men, I think of masculinity. This has associations with the patriarchy, the Om factor, original horror movie monster masculinity factor, which began with at the Prometheonic incident. If you are not familiar with the story of Prometheus, essentially what happened was that Deus did not want the expansion of mankind's consciousness to extend beyond what the gods would allow, and Prometheus wanted mankind to have intellectual, psychological, and existential freedom. When Deus demanded that mankind would have to start making sacrifices of the better prime cuts of meat or beef, or whichever, Prometheus disguised the better parts of the meat as the parts that he wouldn't want, and the parts that were undesirable as the better parts with a sheath of fat. And so Deus himself ended up shorting himself with the shortenings, or he chose the giblets, he chose the chitlets, he chose the part that nobody wants. However, I suppose the word of Deus is final, and thought he couldn't go back on it. So mankind was able to not have to sacrifice as much and retained most of its psychological, mental, and intellectual existential freedom. However, as a punishment for subverting the authority of Deus, he restricted or eliminated the use of fire for mankind. In defiance of Zeus, Prometheus bequeaths the fires of Olympus to mankind and permits them to continue using fire. For this act of defiance, Theos creates women to blight mankind and strips Prometheus of his divine powers, chains him to the peak of a mountain, and leaves him there to have his liver savagely extricated by a giant bird, and by nightfall he would be restored, and this would happen again and again and again for countless millennia, or possibly forever. I'm sure you're asking, what does this have to do with masculinity? Well, I'll tell you what it has to do with masculinity. The curse of Pandora was not the creation of women or females. It was the uniting of man and woman. At that time, just around the time that fire was discovered, mankind was a bit different than you might think of it now. They were more like bears, where they live in groups for protection, but the male was not really involved in the raising of the children. When you think of the protection of the cubs, what do you think of? Well, mama bear. Papa bear's off booping around. As a result, males were defined by that, by fighting. They were big, hairy, strong, ugly, scary things that were made to ward off and fight other males for females. Driven by an insatiable lust for velva and aqua fresca, Pandora was the first modern woman, meaning she was the one who chained man's essence to that state. All of her descendants could not stray too far from that. Propose that intellect is not some special skill, but rather an amplification of consciousness. And thus, if humanity is social in nature, that amplifying humanity ends up causing not just intelligence, but amplified sociability. When humanity began the Prometheonic ascent, actuated or facilitated by the use of fire, and as a result, males started taking an interest in their children and being part of the family. However, because they were chained to the state of the beast, they're still this thing that's meant to fight, that's scary, they're a monster. And Papa Bear now starts overshadowing Mama Bear's role as the protector, hypothetically, let's say. Papa Bear has a presence, the likes of which no one has ever seen before, and that is an amplified version of an important and revered characteristic that was attributed to Mama Bear. Papa Bear is more Mama Bear than Mama Bear. And as a result, the original horror movie monster takes the world by storm, and humanity has had a fetish for men ever since. That was the origin of the patriarchy. Toward the beginning of the barbarianic wars, Aphrodite was the first to be slayed, to fall by the blade Istanu. Immediately afterward, Ares attempted to intervene and was slayed. When Ares returned from non-existence, which is what the blade of Istanu does, it slays gods by wiping them from existence. When any god who was wiped from existence by the blade Istanu returned, they were only allowed to return if they took on an additional title on the behest of Barbario, to become part of the new order. When Ares returned, in addition to being the god of war, violence, and civil order, he had to take on the additional title of the god of the Dark Monarch. What the Dark Monarch means, it is a phrase that refers to dark revelations regarding the nature of one's being or essence, often as a result of a discovery one makes in another of the same kind. An example of the Dark Monarch were information conveyed in events that took place during a program referred to as the Dark Crystal. There were two beings referred to as Gelflings, and it emphasized by perhaps that they were the only two Gelflings remaining, one male, the other female, I presume. They're both hurtling toward certain doom toward the end of the program, and one of them sprouts wings and carries the other away. And as they're being hoisted away from certain death, the male, I assume, looks up at the female with her brilliant butterfly wings and says, "I don't have wings." And the other one says, having known about this, despite the fact that the male, having lived in isolation, unknown if the female knew more about their kind or not, says, "Of course not. You're a boy. This seems to emulate the way that females in general, beyond this specific subtext of volatile reality entertainment information, are conveyed as being the life bearers. Their flesh is endowed with this extraordinary ability, such as the power of flight. That their beauty and their value is derived from and imbibed with a naturally occurring or living drive that is strong and alive, and that we, in comparison, are artificial, that we pretend to have meaning, that in comparison to females we are empty, rotten, hollow, that as boys we are essentially wingless females, which is why he asked why. I don't have wings. Why does being a boy mean being born with something very important having died inside? It can be a very frustrating and demeaning and violating experience that no matter what's going on in your life, or if it's convenient to at a time where you need to be hard and need to be strong and calloused more than ever, that somebody can walk into your life and against your will, no matter what you want, you automatically break down and soften, and your body can't help but open to someone, specifically to be appealing to their touch, as if just so that life can hit you harder, to be made to feel then inferior to someone with whom you are made to feel so vulnerable automatically, can be a very frustrating and violating experience. As a god of violence, and that this associates with male masculinity, this would also thereby associate Aries with male expendability, females being characterized as the queen ant, who generally is bigger, tougher, stronger, maybe smarter, special, is incredibly valuable due to their reproductive power, and as a result, the rest of them are less and more expendable, but there's more of them. Though due to the curse of Pandora, human males tend to be bigger regardless, though let's say that in general, in essence, in the grand scheme of things, females are ferocious as an equivalency to their power. In general, they are ferocious and frightening in the way that a tiger is. A male could be, but is less likely to be, but only a male could be frightening in the way that a mouse is, could be reduced in value to the point where it's not worth, even a very powerful creature, it's not worth being hurt by them. A female, no matter how strong they become or what they do, will never be expendable the way that males are, likely within the current foreseeable paradigm. In addition to mouse power, being the queen ant, for instance, or having that ability in that direction results in constriction to that direction. The queen is always restricted as to where she can go, where, let's say, particularly in the case of humans, that could be a liability. Why are you allowed to rove around and learn more about the world? Because I'm a boy. I don't matter as much, princess. I hope someday someone produces a cogent antithetical retort or a wise crack on that moment from the Dark Crystal, where male expendability ends up making all the difference and shows females that maybe being so great ain't so great after all. Another example of the Dark Monarch is when Goku meets Vegeta during the Saiyan saga. He meets not only another one of his own kind, but specifically the one of the Saiyan elite that characterizes the power structure involved in combat and combat prowess, which Goku values a lot, likely derived from his Saiyan heritage, but more particularly that Vegeta represents the elite power from beyond that subtext of volatile reality entertainment information, of systems of authority that can allow them to concentrate wealth and power, which make them not only more powerful as a blanket statement, but it permits them to expand into everything good in life to a further degree than the people who have less, and at the expense of the people who have less. That they had the same ability to expand, and mayhaps they were naturally inferior, but the difference didn't have to be that great. But these people chose to reduce your access to increase their own, and the beauty of their kind defined, and their ability to have everything that both of your people value is as a result. That his ancestors stole life from yours. They took your chance, and now your people are defined by that theft. You'd think that that would be a very wrenching experience, though it seems that Goku's given the upper hand anyway, that that Goku is naturally talented. It's not to say that Vegeta's a slacker, that he had certain things handed to him and that he doesn't work hard. They both work hard, but it's clearly implied that Goku is the one who's naturally talented, who increases in power more or faster than Vegeta does and eventually surpasses him. So really, Goku is a different form of Saiyan Elite. If Goku was really meant to represent the lower class and Vegeta the upper class, Vegeta should always have the upper hand in the end. To remain true to their equivalencies, if that is the case, Vegeta should have Goku's spot as being the one who... It's close, but everyone knows, right? Goku's probably the better one. Vegeta should have that position, and that is why it is particularly heart-wrenching to know that his people stole that from you, that is a result of theft and imperialism, and that this could never be undone. How would Goku have responded to that? We'll never know.
But find out next time on Dragon Ball Z.
I had a lucid dream with Ares in it. I've had a couple of them, but this was the second one, and I had noticed him sitting at the end of the hall, and I was feeling particularly bold at that moment, considering the last time I met him, I didn't want to deal with him. I wasn't even sure if it was him. He had lifted me, hoisted me off of the ground by my arm and shoulder and pinched a nerve in my shoulder, and then he put me down and he was screaming at me the whole time in a language I didn't understand, and I didn't say anything. I was quiet. This was all very new to me, lucid dreams in general, let alone this. But this time I wanted to say something to him, so I walked over to him. I was a bit more prepared, and he was the way he was sitting is that he had his arm on. He was sitting down, crouching a bit, and his arm was resting on his knee. His elbow was on his knee, as if he were, and he's looking at his arm as if trying to figure out the best way to fold himself into a pretzel. I mean, that's how it looked to me. But I don't know. Anyhow, so then I asked him if he thought it was cowardly to attack the weak. And he turns and gets angry. And remember, he looks and talks like Olivier Martinez this time. He wasn't that way the last time, but now he's this way. And so he becomes all angry, and he says, no, what is cowardice is to let people who are half your size talk boop, and then to pick fights with people you know you cannot beat because you are afraid to go against what everybody tells you. I quickly opted to change the topic, and I asked him what the meaning of life was. And then he got calmer, and he said that the stage of life is set by mere existence, and that anything that commands death will command what can be meaningful, and that the act of murder was the only thing that humans have at their disposal to control death, and that therefore if anything were to have meaning, it would be that, or if anything would have the most meaning, it would be that, violence and murder. I suppose at that point I was starting to lose my nerve, and I was beginning to draw a blank. I had only had those two questions, so I began to walk away, and as I did, he suddenly stopped me, or he says, objection to doing what you're supposed to shows intent to circumvent it, which is wrong. And then he returns to what he was doing, and I continue to walk down the hall. It is said that there are but few things that mortal beings have come to need, and that we have been made to sense as a state of health, that have meaning, so to speak, that we respond to the absence of with a sense of sickness or fear when it is threatened, when as a result of either failure or rejection, these things are denied to us, we may become angry with life and reject our humanity, preferring instead that we could breathe life into those things of our own making, where we have more control. Ares' sister, Athena, was always favored over Ares. Ares denied his father, Deus's, approval, let's say was denied something that was his state of health, Ares, left angry and powerless or helpless, decided to breathe life into something of his own making that would restore his sense of strength and honor. And he called that thing war. This would like to think that Ares created war and that, let's say, Athena perfected it. To add insult to injury, in many senses, mayhaps, though Athena may always outshine her brother Ares, this would like to think that war will always belong to Ares, in a way, the god of war. This is Ares. If you are willing to part with your money, so this can purchase a new computer or to continue making these sculptures, you may do so by clicking on the links or that this will leave in the description of this video.